So when somebody asks you about, your mission work, what is like the number one story that you tell people?
Ooh.
Like, tell me one story, like your most memorable.
Yeah, so I have a couple that kind of jump out. I think one that really highlights, because sometimes I think people ask for a story because they don't know exactly what mission work means. I think sometimes there's this like, oh, you go and you meet people's physical needs, or they think that you only meet their spiritual needs, right? Like you're just there to like throw a Bible at people and then you like walk away or whatever. But one of the things that my mission company I went with was a group called Family Missions Company, and they're based out of South Louisiana. One of the things that they would do is they would have long-term missionaries in places because, to show up in a country for like a week and be like, we're going to go and make everything better, and then we're going to leave like after a week, right?
Yeah.
Like I can understand why people are kind of hesitant of that. So what we would do is we would have long-term missionaries somewhere, so that way when we sent short-term missionaries there, like people there for a week, they were plugging into something that was going to continue after they left. They were just helping with certain projects or whatever, but it was like an established mission. There really is a great need for people to just show up and be like, just them. Be with people in their poverty, be with people in their hurt, and go to the funeral with them, or like go to the hospital with them and hold the hand of the dying loved one that they are having to sit with. And God does a lot through that. I think he really does more than we realize when we show up in that way.
Have you ever been in like a situation where the person's like completely hostile toward you?
Yeah, you do get that. But
don't give me any of that Jesus stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, in one way, my tattoos were helpful in that regard because I didn't always look like the missionary that they thought. They, the missionary was like some super tall white guy or whatever, and like who's like dressed up and looks nice and polished and like here I come, like tiny little Hispanic female with covered in tattoos, and it kind of throws them off. And so in that way, I feel like I had an upper hand. But even the hostile ones, what I have found is the hostility is usually founded in something that is like completely valid. Like a lot of times their hostility comes from like they were extremely wounded in the past, or they've been hurt by someone who either represented the church or who they felt like was the church, or God represented God in some way. And so like really it's coming from a broken place.
Have there ever been any situations where you've been like physically in danger?
There were instances. So when I was in Mexico, that's when the cartel violence, we were in northern Mexico, and at the time that we were there, it was starting to get bad. And people even asked us like, are you going to leave? And we had to take it to prayer, and most of us discerned it, and we're like, no, like we feel called to stay. Like, you guys can't leave. Like these cartel guys are cruising around your town. Like, what are you going to do? We're just going to leave y'all here? Like, no, like y'all don't have that option. So it seemed weird, or like somehow it seemed selfish for us to take the out and be like, yeah, this is dangerous. Good luck. Bye. We're leaving.
How bad was it?
Well, so we started seeing stuff, and just even the locals started telling us like, look, don't come out at night anymore, or don't do this, or don't, and when the locals start, they're going to be honest with you, but when they start like kind of expressing concern without like giving you too many details, that's when you know it's pretty bad, because they don't want to scare you. They're not going to give you all the details, so they won't tell you what's going on, but they'll be like, don't do this, or don't go to this part of town, or don't, whatever. So that was dangerous in Mexico. Ecuador, I actually got out right before. It's so crazy. One of the convents I had visited while I was in Ecuador, a massive earthquake. I think it was an earthquake, and then followed by like because it was on the coast, like I guess like a giant wave or whatever. Like it destroyed this convent. It actually killed a couple of people in the convent, some of the kids, and I had been there like maybe 6 months before. I mean, I had just left, and so and then when I was in London, I forgot what year it was, but there were the London riots that were happening. It must have been around 2010 or something like that, 2009, somewhere in there. Okay. There were a bunch of riots that were going on, and I remember laying there at night and just hearing the sirens just all night long as like the cops were racing, and the police were going back and forth, and ambulances and stuff. Like people were rioting. And so like, even when you think like, oh, well, I'm not going to a third world country, like it's totally safe. It's like, I was in London and I was like probably more scared than I was in some of these other countries and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. So like there were a couple instances like that, but it's like I just knew like as long as I continued to follow the Lord, like I wasn't concerned. I was never like, oh, I don't want to go to that country, it's dangerous, or like I just was like, where does God want me? Because at the end of the day, like even if I'm supposed to go to a country to die, if that's God's will, like that's God's will, and I have to be open to that, right? But so my question is not like, well, where should I go or where is safe? It's like, well, where does God want me to be? And then I have to be faithful to that. And then the rest is up to him on like as far as how that looks and that sort of thing. But we did have missionaries in the Philippines, I think a couple of years ago when I think they declared martial law for a little bit because the Muslims were stuff was going on in the southern islands of the Philippines. And so they're like, we gotta like shut things down. And so like, and we had missionaries there at the time too. And so like, it does happen. Missionaries do get trapped in countries when like crazy things are happening. And that's, that's part of it. But it's like, I mean, you could be anywhere and something crazy happens. So
has there ever been any situation where like the government has told you, you have to pull out?
There have been a few, not to me personally, but I do have some missionary friends where it's like, yeah, either the bishop or like if they knew the local like government officials, they'll tell them like, all right, we need y'all to go. Like things are getting a little too heated. We don't want U.S. citizens here because then when stuff happens like and goes down, like then the U.S. government gets involved,
hostages and all that type of thing.
Yeah, and then you have the embassy and you're dealing with like all sorts of things and they're trying to do, and sometimes it can make stuff worse, especially if the threat can see it as like some sort of leverage. Like, oh, there's Americans there, because then it's like, well, we can do an exchange for some money, we'll hold them hostage or whatever. And so sometimes it's just more of a liability thing. And so bishops or local officials will just kind of like err on the side of caution, just be like, look, like just, we need y'all to go home now. And so that's happened to a couple missionaries, never to me though.